Tell us your story. Welcome to Author Eke. Hi, I'm Travis Davis, your host. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Author Eke. Today, I've got Richard Hewitt, and I am really looking forward to this interview. Just talking to him briefly beforehand, I think everybody's going to enjoy why did he even write a book or books, his motivation, and sometimes when you look at somebody, you don't judge a book by its cover. So go ahead, Richard. Tell everybody about yourself and your book, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was born in Santa Monica, California, and kind of grew up just like a normal kid. I had a God experience when I was in high school and just poured over the scripture. I hated, I should say, religion and didn't want to have anything to do with it. But I was really attracted to the book and the which I call again the script, and the protagonist, often called the Messiah, and then I went to college. I'm actually dyslexic, so I'm terrible at English. Never consider myself a writer, but I went to college, and while I was in college, I had this experience where I was walking by a map of the world and the mountains of Central Asia, jumped out and grabbed my heart and pulled me in. That was in 1987. And I couldn't go to Central Asia at that time, at least not to the former Soviet republics because of the Soviet Union. And kind of followed the call to as close as I could get, which was Pakistan, and met some wonderful people there. And then went back to California and got a degree in agriculture. And then in 91, the Soviet Union collapsed, and I went over to Kyrgyzstan in 94 and started working with farmers up in the high mountains in Central Asia.
Oh, wow.
And it was fascinating. While I was up there, I was actually kind of, even though I was an adult, I was adopted as a child, and I was the family had 12 kids, so I was the 13th, but age-wise, I was actually 5th.
That's a baker's dozen, by the way, just for the bakers out there. It's a baker's dozen.
Oh, is it really? The 13, not 12. Throw an extra one in.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah. And I was, so I was up there, and while I was up there, I started to see a lot of similarities between the Kyrgyz and the ancient Hebrews that I'd read about in the script. So I started to write about some of those similarities. And sometimes I'd write allegory, and sometimes I'd write academic papers.
Mm-hmm.
And a book I published probably about 12 years ago, and in Kyrgyz, first in the Kyrgyz language, just talks about how I see the link between the Kyrgyz and the ancient Hebrews through the lost tribes of Israel. And then more recently, I've kind of tried to develop that into a theology, and wrote a book called Come Home, and that just came out in December.
Awesome. So are you self-published, or do you find you have a publisher?
I'm self-published. And
okay.
I published probably about 5 or 7 books in Kyrgyzstan in the Kyrgyz language.
In their language?
Yeah, in Kyrgyz language, yeah. And
I've never even heard of that. Is that Kyrgyzstan, or where is it?
It's Kyrgyzstan. It's close to Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all the stans, and it's north of Afghanistan a little bit. But I know, Travis, I saw that you also kind of were familiar with the communism and the former Soviet Union, and also I think you and I have some overlap on experiences there.
Not good.
Yeah, it's a painful culture. I mean, I love the Kyrgyz culture, but the communism was really painful, really hurtful.
Yeah, I mean, it like you said, you wanted to go somewhere because you just for nothing other than to learn about a culture and to widen your horizons mentally, but you couldn't because they wouldn't let you in.
Right.
Yeah. And just think of how many people or how things could be different if they, just learn about us, because then your perspective can change, right?
Right.
You said your perspective changed by visiting folks that you may have a preconceived notion, but now totally opposite because you lived with them and you met them.
I'm so glad I went to Kyrgyzstan, lived there for almost 20 years, and again, just really enjoyed these people. They're really like family now. I have My kids have Kyrgyz aunts and uncles back in Kyrgyzstan, and
Well, that's awesome.
yeah,
That's good for a kid, I think. I lived in Spain and Germany and everything, and I just think it's important to
yeah,
know other folks.
right, right.
Get out of your neighborhood. I mean,
So,
that's for sure.
one thing about my books is they were all very controversial while I was over there. Again, they had been in the Soviet Union for a long time, and I was
Mhm.
starting to write about God and the connections between the good book and their culture. And then also Islam started really coming in quite aggressively in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And so
Yeah.
um, when I'd write from a biblical perspective or something
Mhm.
about Jesus, there's often a big backlash, but there are also people that really liked it. So some people are saying keep writing, and other people said, if you write another book, we're gonna.
Gonna put a fuck on you. Yeah, I mean,
they,
well, look, people that don't know, typical communist countries are atheist or
yeah.
non-religious, right? It can't be about religion. It has to be about the government.
Mhm.
That has to be your religion, is the government. You can't believe in another something other than that higher
Yeah.
power. That's how they
Well,
keep you control.
being from Santa Monica, which is very, very secular, and then having
Mhm.
lived over in the former Soviet Union, I see two different denominations within atheism.
Mhm.
One is kind of the nice American version, and the
Yeah,
other really a very mean and ruthless
yeah,
um, Soviet version. Yeah. And
oh yeah,
I don't say that to belittle the people, because again, I love the people, but the
right.
system itself was just brutal.
So what kind of motivates you to write? Is it just to get your thought out? Is it to enlighten people? Is it to or just
Yeah,
like doing it
um,
now?
yeah, I appreciate the question. It for me, it's interesting. I can't really say that the writing necessarily is
Mhm.
was like religion for me or religious for me,
Right,
because
right.
I definitely had a call to go, and that one I would say was spiritual or religious, but the desire to write is, yeah, to communicate these ideas and the pictures that I see. Uh, I love this ancient old book, the script, and I love Kyrgyz culture, and seeing the place where the two overlap for me was fascinating. And to be able to write about that and share that with the Kyrgyz, and not only partake in their
Mhm.
culture, but show them the most popular book that's ever been written, and their leaders, through the Soviet era, and now again with what I would call a foreign form of Islam. So they're not in charge of the mosque and the teaching. The
Mhm.
teachers come from the outside. So I just want to show them the beauty of their culture and their book. And I actually had a man who I went up to a village one time up in the high mountains, and I
Mhm.
said to some of the young men on the outskirts of the village, I said, "Can I meet the person who knows your culture more than anyone else in the village?" And they said, "Sure." And they were going to take me to the Islamic mullah. But right before we got to his house, they said, "There's actually another man who knows our culture
Another
better."
person.
Right. And so we turned and went down another street, went to his house, did the customary tea and greeting and
Uh-huh.
all. And then I said, I had the good book in my hand, and I said, "Can I read something from this to you?" And he said, "No, I don't want to pollute my ancestral line. I don't want to curse my descendants."
Uh-huh.
So then we talked, and I said, "Well, you have this God guest tradition in your culture."
Mhm.
And we talked about the God guest culture. God can come walking up to your camp, to your yurt. Your
Mhm.
yurt is like a nomadic dwelling.
Mhm.
He come walking up to your yurt, and you need to welcome him. And we talked about their culture. And then I said, if you won't read it, is it okay if I open it up and just read this passage to you? And they said, yeah. So I just read where Abraham and the two angels in Genesis in the
Mhm.
Torah, they come walking up to Abraham's camp, and Abraham welcomes them in. And when I was reading that story to him, he was so enamored. It caught and grabbed him so powerfully
Mhm.
that he actually took the book from my hand and started reading it for his own. And 20 minutes earlier, he had said he wouldn't touch it because it was foreign, it was bad. He was
Mhm.
going to pollute his ancestral line and
Right,
curse
right.
his descendants. So and the only reason why I could do that is because because the book itself, the script, the text spoke
Right.
so powerfully to his own soul.
Yeah.
And then I went on a little bit further, and I said, you've got a legend of a wanderer, the wanderer, who might come wandering into your village, and if you recognize him and meet him, you're supposed to hold on to him until you get his blessing. And they're like, yeah, yeah. So we talked about it, and he said, he explained some more to me. And then I read from Genesis 32 and just said, Jacob was out by himself by this creek and met an angel and started wrestling with him. And at one point he's called a man, and another time an angel, and another time God. And Jacob won't let go of this angel until he gets the blessing. And the blessing that the angel gave to Jacob was, he says, your name will no longer be called Jacob, but you'll be called Israel. And that's where the name Israel comes from, meaning to wrestle with God. And then the angel touches Jacob on the hip, and Jacob becomes lame, can't walk after that. Let's go, the angel. The angel disappears. But the very last verse of that says, of Genesis 32 in the good book, in the Torah, says, for this reason, the children of Israel don't eat the tendon on the hip to this day. And, that was written,
wow.
that was written 3,500 years ago.
Yeah.
But the Kyrgyz will slaughter a sheep and they eat everything on it, everything, things that I almost can't digest, but they won't eat that one tendon on that on the hip bone.
So the stories are similar. They had to originate somewhere centrally.
There's a massive overlap between the two. And again, these are things that I just started to list them down, and then after the list got longer and longer, I started to write about them. And yeah,
that's amazing. That's interesting. I mean, when you talk to fables or stories, everybody has their own version of the same thing.
Right.
They're just called different.
It's fascinating. And I really think one of the biggest roots or connecting points is again the book that's kind of been translated into more languages than any other book. And it's fascinating. I was up on the mountain in a yurt drinking fermented horse milk one time. Have you ever had fermented horse milk?
I haven't had both of those.
Like horse milk beer or something. They call
horse
it
milk. Don't say that too loud. My son will try that. So
I mean, before going to Kyrgyzstan, I didn't even know you could milk a horse, but Kyrgyz will just very patiently and quietly quietly come up to the mare and milk the mare, get a little bit of milk and go to the next, and then they make this fermented horse milk beer out of it. And while I was up in the yurt on the mountains listening to the story of their legend, their legendary hero is a man named Manas. And Manas was a shepherd boy who killed a giant and became king. So you have a little bit of the story of David and Goliath. David, the shepherd boy, killed the giant and became king of Israel. And then David's best friend was Jonathan, and Jonathan was the son of Saul who wanted to kill David. And the best friend of Manas was the son of a king who wanted to kill Manas. So you have this pattern, like the biblical pattern, playing out, and it goes on and on and on. It's not just that.
In multiple languages, cultures, everything. But it's all very similar when you get to the crux of it.
It is really similar. It's really beautiful. And the storyteller, when I was up there in the yurt, stopped telling me the story and said, do you know the name of Manas's father? And I said, no. And with big eyes leaning forward, he just said, Jacob. And when he said Jacob, I thought, Jacob. And
you thought you had too much fermented horse beer.
I can't drink too much of that, to be honest.
Man, that'd have to be a hell of a hangover. I mean, I'm just gonna have to think about that.
To be honest with you, it affects my stomach before it hits my head.
Oh, I would think it would be like, affect my hand, but I won't pick it up. But that's awesome. So you wrote a book in another language. It's not even
to be fair, I wrote it in English and had translators translate it, and then I corrected it in the other language. I corrected it in Kyrgyz. Yeah.
I can't even correct English.
I know I'm pretty bad. I'm pretty bad at correcting in English too. So.
That's pretty cool though. You're the first person I've met, other than somebody that Spanish, but Spanish,
Yeah.
French, German, Italian. I mean, but a language that I'm gonna have to look on the map.
Yeah.
And for you folks, they're young folks. There's a thing called a globe, and it's a round ball, and typically it would have where the mountains it would be raised, and you could run your fingers over that and tell where like geographical boundaries are, where the plains are, the mountains. So young kids, go out and buy one, close your eyes and run your hand over that thing and see how the mountains are connected, even when you talk about the Andes and the Rockies and the Alps and all these things. And so I like to do a little learning for the kids every once in a while.
It's great. The Kyrgyzstan is in, it's got two mountain ranges. One is called the Tian Shan and the other is the Pamir in the south. And there's a knot of mountains called the Pamir Knot, where the Hindu Kush, the Tian Shan, Pamir, and the Himalayas all come together. So yes, if the kids do kind of feel the globe, the highest mountains are very close to Kyrgyzstan.
No, yeah, Nepal is close to that. I mean, and, India, K2, Mount Everest, and all the others.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So, are you going to go back? When's your next trip back? How often you get back? Or
it's home for me. So
oh wow,
I was raised here. I'm in Santa Monica right now, raised here, and I've been back with my family actually for 10 years. But yeah, I go back and sometimes for conferences, sometimes for family and also
that is pretty darn good. That's man, how do you get there? You got to go to Frankfurt or Dubai, or how? I mean,
you can fly through Frankfurt and Dubai, but right now the best way is through Istanbul, actually. Yeah, before it had been through London, but then then British Air kind of lost some of the space to Turkish Air. But we've gone through Frankfurt a few times.
Okay.
Through Dubai one time.
Man, that'd be a long flight.
It's literally on the other side of the world from California.
It is, and on top almost when you think about it from an altitude perspective.
Yeah,
those are high mountains.
Yeah.
So, you got anything else? I mean, like, what's in the offing? Another book or venture out, or
it's interesting. We started a little kind of chat that we do around the world, mostly with Asia, called the Lost Tribes Cafe, and there's a lot of theology involved in all of this, obviously, and Jews will often pray 3 times a day for the lost tribes of Israel to return. And according to Jewish theology, when all the tribes return, then Messiah will come. So I speak about this to Jewish audiences on a fairly common basis, a regular basis, and it's just some of the theology is fascinating. In May, this coming May, there's going to be a reconciliation conference where Judah, or who we know as the Jews today, will try to reconcile themselves with what they call the lost tribes of Israel, and so they've invited a number of us into this conference to try and find a connecting point. And obviously the big stumbling stone is Jesus, because we all recognize the same book, the same scripture, the same prophets, same prophecies, but the big point is whether Yeshua or Jesus is the Messiah or not. And so one of the fascinating aspects of living over in Asia is to actually find not only anthropological evidence that points Central Asians and people along the Silk Road and even the Japanese back to Israel and to the Torah, but there's also a number of these anthropological evidences that recognize a Messiah, a messianic figure. Sometimes he's actually named as Jesus Messiah. Islam has Jesus mentioned by name, Isa, and and then you'll find his name Uza or Uzamasa in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and in Kyrgyzstan too. This wanderer that I mentioned to you,
Right.
a very powerful messianic
Huh.
figure that has many characteristics pointing right back to Jesus in the New Testament.
That's amazing. Because I know there's a lot of Jews in Ethiopia. There's
Right,
and that's where they say the Ark of the Covenant is being
right.
guarded by a
Yep.
blind person. Um, I mean, because I love that stuff, like Knights Templars and all
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I mean, I've read a lot of books on there. It's just fascinating to me.
There's no end to it. There's no
Yeah.
end. These
Oh yeah.
cultural, anthropological branches just go and go and go.
Yes. Yeah. And they're all connected. They have a trunk. That's
They
amazing.
are all the Kyrgyz. The Kyrgyz in their legend of Manas, they have a story of the ambassadors going to Iran and to Hungary, and then some ambassadors went to the deep, and the ambassadors that went to Hungary and Iran all came back,
Mhm.
but those that went to the deep never came back. And I had a Navajo friend come and visit me in Kyrgyzstan, and he couldn't believe how similar the Kyrgyz and the Navajo were. And
Now that's amazing.
right. So a lot of the Kyrgyz scholars believe that the ambassadors that went to the deep became the Native American, and the Native Americans among themselves have the tradition of lost tribes of Israel, whether they're the lost tribes of Israel or not. And so, again, we just see, like you say, these connections just go and go and go.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. So, what you got to have any advice for like inspiring authors or somebody that maybe has an idea? What do you do with it? You know, how long did it take you to write your books? By the way.
Again, with my dyslexia, I'm super slow, and
Mm-hmm.
I there's a bit of a perfectionist in me that wants to just go back and revisit
Right.
the page again and again and again. And because a lot of the material that I'm writing about is so as ABC for me now,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of expect my reader to be there, and I often forget that my reader's not there. So I've got to
Right.
go back and kind of lay a better foundation for my reader. So for me, writing is a long process, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a real kind of joy in it. Like I did write a screenplay when I was in Kyrgyzstan,
Oh,
and
nice.
one
I'm
point
looking for a screenplay. I'm looking for a screenwriter, as a matter of
are
fact,
you
too.
are you really? Yeah.
So you know anybody, you know.
Well, yeah, it was the first of two.
Uh-huh.
The second one I kind of was a co-writer on, but both of them were about Kyrgyzstan. And I remember kind of going back to my screenplay and getting so caught up in it. I mean, it was fiction. It was all fiction,
Right.
and crying at one point. It's like
Yeah.
but there's the thing. I guess my advice would be is like follow your heart. If you're dreaming and thinking about
Mm-hmm.
something, get it down and get it on paper. And another word of advice that I have is just kind of pray that simple prayer like, Lord, lead me and
Yeah.
deliver me from temptation and protect me from evil. And just so, it kind of clears that space in the mind
Mm-hmm.
and kind of,
It does. It does.
yeah,
Definitely. Talking about the screenplay. I was executive producer of a film that my nephew one day came to, hey, Uncle Travis, I'm going to write a movie. I said, well, Sean, if you ever write a movie, I'm going to pay for it.
wow.
Wait, don't do that. Don't say that. Don't say that to anybody. Because then, so he came back a couple years later. I wrote my movie and a short film, and everything. And I said, well, all right, how much, so I gave him a check. And so now I'm out there on IMDb. So I can actually go out, and because I have credits that I can do stuff in the movie industry that I didn't
That's
know,
great.
that I could do. So I'm like, whatever. But
Oh, that's
that's
great. You should
crazy.
send a link. Can you put a link on it?
Oh yeah, yeah,
That'd be
it's
fun.
crazy,
That'd
crazy.
be fun to see.
Good movie. But it's nice you walk in there and they're, Mr. and Mrs. Davis are the executive producer. Would you like coffee? I'm like, man, this is the way to live.
Yeah.
This. But
Yeah, well,
so
this first one never got produced. The second one did get shot, but not the first one.
there's a lot that is it Forrest Gump. So the person wrote the book, they wrote the screenplay, put it out. There's a place you put screenplays. You got 5 years of copyrights if you don't renew it.
Right.
It was found on that, from what I was told, and then it was written then they rewrote it into the screenplay. What
Wow.
you see is Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever, but I'm a plethora of almost useless knowledge sometimes, so it's interesting.
No, I think what we know, sometimes there's always a connection. There's always a
I
place.
know, it's crazy. Well, man, this was like a history class in theology. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Travis. It again, like the theology itself goes on and on, and
mhm.
the examples and the verses that tie in from scripture and the connections with other religions also. We just had a conference call with some Japanese about Shintoism and all the connections that the Shinto
Oh,
religion, the
really?
Japanese nationalistic religion, has to the script. There were Shinto priests that went to Israel and basically asked, why are Shintoism and Judaism so similar? And yeah,
That is,
so
I never even thought that because you think of Shintoism or Buddhism and things like that. It's more like nature or not, or I don't know,
right,
really. Yeah.
right. And the man that was sharing with us, the Japanese scholar, was saying that it's obviously Shintoism is polytheistic now, but up until the 8th century, it had been monotheistic. And
Ah.
and its origin, they have temples that really seem to be built after the pattern of
Mhm.
Solomon's temple in scripture. And the priests, there's a scholar named Adimasa Kubo who's written a
Mhm.
lot about this in both English and Japanese. Um,
Somebody has a blueprint.
somebody's got a
Somebody,
blueprint. Somebody dropped the blueprint from heaven, in my opinion.
somebody got a blueprint, and
I, I I love God's story. I just think it's amazing,
oh
and
yeah, it is.
it definitely goes way beyond the boundaries of Judaism and Christianity, and
Mhm.
it's amazing.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you today.
You
I
too,
mean,
Travis.
I am
Thank you
like
for having me
now my
on.
head's a buzzing.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you for having me
Well,
on.
thank you and good luck. And if I do anything for you, just please let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Author Eke. There'll be another episode next week. Please stop by and start your own story. We can't wait to hear it.